Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Imaginary Lines. This is episode 15. I am Keith Giles, author, podcaster, and fan of movies, films, art, books, and stuff. And I'm joined by my good friend Darrell Epp, poet, also fan of movies, art, films, literature, comics, and stuff. So say hi, Darrell.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. We appreciate your time.
Oh, and we we had talked about dedicating this episode to a very special
Yes.
person. When you start off doing a podcast, you don't really know how many people are going to appreciate it. You hope they like it, but you kind of say to yourself, if I could even just reach one person, if there's just one person who really appreciates this and it makes a difference to them, it might be worth it. And you know what? We have done that. We have reached one person. There is one person who really, really loves this podcast. And we would like to dedicate this podcast to our biggest fan. What's his
Yeah.
name? What's his name? He's on Twitter, right? He's always
Yeah.
sharing us and praising us.
And he's actually one of the few people I know of who actually paid full retail for Mechanical Monkey,
Oh, wow.
which puts him in a very special group. So this episode is for Orrin Douglas Jennings in
Woo!
Illinois.
Thank you, sir. He is a graphic artist and an art teacher. He's an illustrator of the Dragon Camp book and creator of Tigracorn, which is, I think, a unicorn tiger. Tigracorn. I don't know how you say that. Tigracorn. Anyway, let us know, Douglas. How do we say that? And he's co-creator of Stacky Comic. So thank you, sir. Thank you for loving and praising and sharing and appreciating these podcasts. This one goes out to you, my friend. May your tribe increase.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be great.
Exponentially. Yeah.
Exponentially, yes. Okay, so we want to do our top 10 science fiction films. We just did our for Halloween, we did our top horror films, which I'm kind of at a disadvantage because I'm not a huge horror fan. As you could probably tell from my list, wasn't pure horror. So I tried my best to put together what I think, at least right now, because this is a moving target. This is a moving list. It's a living. It moves. It changes. And but I guess before we go into that, you wanted me to kind of give you my take on the new movie Dune that just came out.
Well, just because it sounded like you were into it,
Oh,
so
yes, I really, really loved it. So this will be a pretty off the cuff review because I mean, so I'm not a crazy Dune fan in the sense of like, I've never read the books. In fact, I tried to read Dune when I was younger, like in high school or something, maybe college. And I gave up because every third word was some strange new word. And there's a glossary in the back. And so I'd have to put my finger in the glossary and flip back and go, what's a Canissarat? Oh, that's a butter knife. Okay, got it. And then I'd read
yeah,
another three words and then, oh, what's a Sasbot? And I go back and flick in the glossary. Oh, that's a fork. Like, just say the word, okay? I don't need to learn a new language here. That's what it felt like to me. I get so frustrated flipping back and forth. And then, and then they keep adding words all the time. And then all of a sudden, a word that I had read 6 pages ago would come back again. And I'm like, I can't remember what that is. Is that a bowl? Or is that a ceremonial headdress? Like, I don't know. And at this point, I just don't care. So I never read, sorry, if you're a huge Dune fan, I'm sure I just insulted you, but I just couldn't get into the book. I'm sure it's amazing. I just couldn't get past that. So I never read the books.
actually, it's kind of an interesting problem what you just said there, where when people start writing fiction, and this happened to me when I was a teenager, the question is, how do you deal with slang,
Yeah.
right? Because you're a writer, you have an ear, and you notice people use slang. People say ing instead of people say in apostrophe in real life
Yeah.
instead of ing.
Right.
And like if you go to England, people don't say, "Do you know what I mean?" They say, "Do you know me?" Right? Yeah, if they're from Wilshire or something, right?
Right.
So you think, okay, I want to be true, so I'll write, me, right, in letters. But when on the page, that often looks like hammy or show offy.
Yeah.
And like, Zora Neale Hurston in her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, she used all the dialogue in slang.
Yeah.
And some critics gave her some heat for that. And then she's like, well, that's my life. Growing up, that's what I heard. Like, it's true. Like, what are you going to do? Right.
That's right.
You know, it's funny. I remember when I was a kid, they had versions of a Clockwork Orange that had a glossary at the back,
Yeah.
and they had versions that didn't.
Yes.
Right. And I remember when I found a copy that had the glossary, I'm like, thanks.
Right.
This helps.
Yeah,
right?
no, so you know what? Okay, this is a fascinating that you brought that up because I don't think I would have connected those dots. But now I did read Clockwork Orange, and I do think the one I read had a glossary in the back, but that didn't bother me. That's interesting. So I want to ask, now I'm curious why that didn't bother me. I think it's because the tone of that book was a little different. It felt more like I was talking to a single person. I was listening to a single person sort of from the future. And they were speaking in slang. They have slang words for all kinds of things. But some of the slang made sense. You know what I mean? Like I could almost figure it out without too much help. And it didn't feel like, I guess this is the problem, I guess really what it is, it's with world building, right? So Frank Herbert in Dune is world building, and he wants you to kind of feel immersed in this alien culture and this other planet and blah, blah, blah. And I get that, but it just felt like it was too much for my mind to juggle at the same time. Whereas in Clockwork Orange, I only got little bits of it here and there in conversations that felt like, oh, I get it. Even if I don't get it, I can kind of get the gist of it. You know what I mean? I'm not completely clueless as to what that phrase might be referring to. So yeah, it's funny. I had actually forgotten that Clockwork Orange did that. But now when you reminded me, I'm like, yeah, I did do that. And for some reason, it didn't bother me as much.
Well, actually, I have to say, one thing is that Tony Burgess did it darn well. Yeah. And his made-up words had this internal consistency to them.
Yeah.
Where he'd have a made-up word and like, let's say, for example, like, if like head was nuggin or something.
Right.
And then 50 pages later, it said, you hit the nail on the noggin.
You get it.
You go like, oh yeah, I get it, right? It has this internal consistency to it where once you kind of crack the code and you're inside, you'd see a foreign word and you can almost squint and like figure it out, right?
And see, this is the difference too, because I don't know that I would consider what Herbert is doing in Dune slang. It really is more like, let's learn a new language, right? And I'm not into like learning a new language. I just want to read a damn story. So anyway, that was my barrier. That was my barrier for Dune.
You know, Tolkien also does stuff like that,
right?
In his book, like the Silmarillion or whatever, where if you want to get the real bang for your buck here, you got to learn my language first.
Yes.
And
yeah. Anyway, so let's continue on with the movie. So again, I'm just not a big fan of the book. I did see the David Lynch version, and the funny thing is, it's not great, but what I appreciated was when I saw it in the theater was that at least it explained the story to me. Here's the story, the book I couldn't read, and at least in visual form, I can sit here for like an hour and a half, and you condensed the story to me and told it to me visually, like, okay, I get it. Well, now I feel like I know the story now. I thank you. So I appreciated like somebody sort of made it digestible for me in that form. I know it's not that great, but anyway, when you now, fast forward, Denis Villeneuve, I think one of the greatest filmmakers alive today. He's Canadian, by the way.
Yeah,
You knew that, right? Okay, of course you did.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Great filmmaker. I mean, he made Arrival, which I really loved. Great sci-fi film. He made Blade Runner 2049, sequel to one of my favorite films of all time. It was a phenomenal film as well. And so Dune is like a dream project for him. He was a huge fan as a kid. And I got to say, phenomenal job. So I really did love it. I've seen it twice now on IMAX. If I can, I'm going to see it at least one more time while it's still in the theaters. Maybe around my birthday, which is coming up in the next week. Maybe not on IMAX, but I definitely want to see it in the theater again while I can. And so it's difficult to say, like, to review it. Like, it's just to say, whether to say like I loved it. It's beautiful. The scale and the scope of it is phenomenal. I think this is why I really recommend people watch it, not on HBO Max, but go into a theater and see it on a big screen. IMAX, I think, does it justice. Number one, it was filmed in IMAX, and IMAX has this, huge screen, and you really kind of need that to get. He's constantly playing with scale, so you have these, characters, and you know how big they are, and then it'll pull back, or you see a scene where like they're dwarfed by some massive ship. And so he does that a lot, where you're constantly seeing scale of things. That's really great. It's beautiful. The way it's shot, like every shot you can almost, screenshot it and blow it up and put it on your wall. It's just gorgeous to look at. I felt like each character, each actor was able to really bring life to that character, even if they didn't have a whole lot of screen time. I felt like within a few seconds, I knew that character, I understood them, and I loved them. I just felt like, okay, I get this person, I get this character. And again, this is someone who's not read the book. So like, I don't have some backstory of like, oh yeah, that's who that guy is. Like, I really still don't know who's that guy. And so, yeah, Oscar Isaac is phenomenal. Rebecca Ferguson is great. Timothy Chalamet, who plays Paul Atreides, is great. Even Jason Momoa, who I don't think I've ever thought was a great actor, probably plays my absolute favorite character. He is my favorite character in this movie, Duncan Idaho, who is just flipping awesome. And way more depth than just like, hey, I'm a badass tough guy. Like, there's real depth to this guy. And I don't know, I just loved it. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It doesn't finish the story. So if you're familiar with Dune, it doesn't end the story, but there will be a part 2. They have to wait about 2 years to get that, unfortunately. But I loved it, highly recommend it, and really recommend you see it on a big screen. People that I've heard who didn't like it watched it at their house on HBO Max, and I think that's part of the problem, that this film is not made to be seen on a small screen. So there you go. I guess that's my review. Oh, and soundtrack. Okay. Oh, quick. The soundtrack. Holy moly. That soundtrack is just amazing. Hans Zimmer knocked it out of the park. He was going to do Tenet, the soundtrack for Tenet with Christopher Nolan, who is his partner. He's done almost every Nolan film. And he turned down Tenet to work on Dune because he also loved Dune as a kid. And of course, the irony is that he probably could have done both because it took so long for Dune to come out. He could have done Tenet and then still done Dune probably. But at any rate, the soundtrack's gorgeous. He even invented instruments for the soundtrack so it would sound alien. So you wouldn't be able to recognize all the instruments. And it's just so good. Really, really good. Every level for me, a total of 10. So that's my review.
That's pretty cool. I actually saw a movie in IMAX one time. I saw the movie Gravity on an IMAX screen in Toronto.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you've seen Gravity.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how there was one bit where she said, she wanted to pray, but she never learned how because she was always too busy.
Yeah.
And they did this thing where when she was floating in anti-gravity, she was kind of like floating in the fetal position, so it looked like a womb kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is a beautiful film. I really do love that movie, and I think that's one that gets overlooked quite a bit. But I think it's really beautiful. It's very well filmed. I mean, it's just incredible, the effects and the way they do it. I mean, it looks really really good, but there's just a really beautiful simple story in it, as well. I mean, it's got this huge scope of a story, but in the end, it's really about a woman trying to get back to her daughter and trying to
Yeah,
deal
yeah,
with her
yeah.
own personal
Sure, yeah.
feelings. It's really good.
Yeah, I wonder what it would be like if I had seen Gravity the first time on a phone or on some TV,
Right.
you know. Um, but yeah, Gravity's in a special category of movies that really have this time pressure going for them.
Yeah.
Like, Walter Hill, who's great, he made the movie Southern Comfort, which is basically like 10 Little Indians, but in the swamp in Louisiana, where
Yeah.
a platoon gets picked off one by one. And there's no subplot, there's no romance because everything matters, and it really gives things this urgency to it, right?
Yeah. I really like that movie.
So
We talked about that, I think, last time. I love that movie.
I think it's perfect where it really is this primal struggle kind of deal, right? Very
Yeah.
much like, Jack London, his story To Build a Fire, where if this guy doesn't build a fire and find some dry twigs, he's going to freeze to death, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's really neat sometimes. And then obviously in Gravity, it's, you might say it's a story of a woman who had grief and kept herself really busy with her career to avoid dealing with the grief. And then
Yeah.
on paper, if you look at the plot of Gravity, it's like, this is a heck of a lot of coincidences to pack into 2 hours.
Right.
Like how she jettisons into the Chinese space station, happens
Right.
to find the English version of the manual,
Right.
right? Stuff like that, right? Where like if I told you that, you go, that's a bit of a stretch. But on an IMAX, you're like, yeah, sure, go for it, right?
Yeah, I gotta say that movie too. And by the way, we're not even into our top 10 list, I don't think, unless that was one of your top 10.
No, no, no.
But that movie does a wonderful job too with just this feeling of like you're saying, urgency. Like, oh my gosh, dude, like I remember my heart like beating out of my chest when she's trying to read that manual. Like, but she's got to figure out the manual and the sequence for whatever she's got to do to fire the rockets or whatever. But with this, she's got like seconds to read this and figure out the sequence perfectly. And I'm like, it's so stressful. Like, oh God, I'm thinking
Yeah,
if that was me, I would just die. I would not be able to do that in time, and I would die. So yeah, but that was really good. I really like that movie.
yeah, and it was interesting how the George Clooney character, he's like, okay, I'm dead in 2 minutes, but before I go, he had to say these things to help her and like, give her a chance.
Yeah,
So that's kind of interesting in terms of heroism, right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That's a really good one, but not on my list.
yeah.
So do you want to
No,
start? Or do
no.
you want me to start?
Oh, basically, when it comes to Dune, let's see. I didn't read the book, haven't seen the movie. I remember one time I was at a party and I saw the first half hour of the David Lynch version, which I thought looked. The first half hour I thought it looked pretty great. So,
There you
and
go.
that's all I know about Dune.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to do your do our list now? Our top 10 sci-fi films lists.
Okay. Basically, there's a lot of science fiction movies that I dig. If basically there's a list of about uh, there's certain things in life that I'm really passionate about where I would like fight you over.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's a pretty short list.
Okay.
Uh, Things like Chekhov,
Yeah.
The Wild Bunch, John Huston, and then other things where like I could talk to you about you know Star Trek all day, but if someone says Star Trek isn't their thing, I wouldn't care too much, right?
Right. Same here.
So basically, my top 10 list of science fiction movies that I would go to the wall for um, is one movie, and in the future we will do an episode on this movie. And the
Okay.
movie is called Seconds by John Frankenheimer. Um, it's kind of in a tie for my second or first favorite movie of all time. And
This
I
is the
think
Rock,
it's
the
like
Rock Hudson film.
Rock Hudson. Yeah.
Yes, I have seen that movie, and you know what? Let's do that. I would love to set aside an entire episode to discuss that film.
Okay. Basically, my top 10 science fiction movies of all time, 1 to 10, is Seconds. Now it's back to you.
Okay, I love that list. And coming in
Yep,
at number one, Seconds, followed by
That's the list.
number 2, Seconds. Okay.
Seconds. Yeah.
All right. So
and if we have time, I'll get to 11, 12, 13, 14.
okay.
But I'm done. Back to you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try and go quickly if I can, and
You
we'll see.
don't have to. Sure.
Yeah, we'll just see. I'm going to start at number 10. I'm going to count down to number 1.
Nice.
Okay. So number 10 on my top 10 list. And by the way, this is a moving target, as I said. I have a Letterboxd page, which is, I love Letterboxd. It basically lets you catalog films you've seen, review films you've seen, and you can make lists of all kinds of different, and I got tons of different lists on my Letterboxd. So the problem is I don't think I've really created a top 10. Well, I have, but I haven't. I cheated. I have a top 25 sci-fi films list, but then I also made recently a top sci-fi films list starting from 2000, because I realized there have been some great sci-fi films made in the 2000s that I would want to kind of look at separately from like sort of all time. So this is sort of an amalgam of those two lists. But anyway, my number 10, I think anyway, would be The Matrix. I think I love The Matrix. Again, and that's one. Sometimes it seems like when you say The Matrix, it's become kind of this cheesy thing, like, oh, The Matrix. But I'm telling you, man, when that movie, first of all, that movie came out, when I saw it in the theater, nobody knew what it was. That was their whole marketing campaign. What is The Matrix? And they did a pretty good job of kind of keeping you in the dark about what the hell was going on. I had just read William Gibson's Neuromancer, which is a phenomenal book, which pretty much invented cyberpunk. And as I'm watching The Matrix, I'm like, damn, they just ripped off Neuromancer. That's what this is. This is Neuromancer on the screen. But of course, the thing about The Matrix is, what's that phrase? I can't remember how it goes, but it's like, basically genius steals, right? If you don't want to just borrow something, you want to steal. And so The Matrix steals from everything. They steal from Ghost in the Shell. They steal from Philip K. Dick. They steal from Neuromancer. They steal from Buddhism and philosophy and John Woo films and just everything you can think of. It's all kind of this big sort of like, let's take from all the things we love and shove them into one movie. But at the same time, it's still a really phenomenal film about, a different way of looking at the world we live in, as if, well, what if this is real, and how would we know if it wasn't, right? We're all floating in tanks somewhere and having this wonderful collective dream. And this explains why everything tastes like chicken, or it explains why deja vu happens. It's actually a glitch in the Matrix, or
Right.
things like that. And there's some really wonderful, again, it's an amalgamation of Christianity, Buddhism, philosophy, but in really cool ways. I mean, it's a really, I think, smart blend of all those things. And so it's sort of like, it's not just a sort of a mindless sci-fi action film. It really is playing with some pretty deep ideas and concepts, and it really invites you to think about those things. And I love it. I think it stands the test of time. And in fact, I would even want to say, in my mind, there is only one Matrix film, and they never made any sequels ever, because that first movie is perfect the way it is. The way it ends is the way it should end. Because everything after that just pretty much undid the whole first film. But I love, The Matrix is my number 10.
Okay. I have not seen The Matrix. I basically started ignoring contemporary culture around 1994. So I guess there's 2.5 or 3 generations of pop culture I've missed so far.
You need to watch The Matrix, man. Come on.
Yeah, maybe someday.
All right.
So number 9.
Okay, number 9. My number 9 is a very obscure film, but I really, really love this film. It's a foreign language film. It was filmed in Spanish, and it's called Time Crimes. So it's sort of an independent kind of low budget film in the sense of like there's no whiz bang special effects. There's a little bit, but it's very, very minimal in the story. And it's probably I would say it is the best time travel film I have ever seen. And it's called Time Crimes. I don't want to give too much away, but it's essentially about a guy, just an ordinary guy. He and his wife buy a new house, and they're kind of off secluded from civilization. And his wife goes out to buy some food and some groceries, or something like that. And he's looking out at the forest with his binoculars, and he sees this woman, and she's sort of being held at knife point by the stranger. And so he goes to rescue her, and then the guy hits him in the head, and all these things start happening. And then he gets caught in this time loop. I won't explain you. When you see the film, you'll understand it. But he gets caught in this weird time loop. And the way it handles that is so good. I don't think I've ever seen a film that handled time travel as well as it did. And it sort of wants to play with this idea of whether or not we have free will, or whether we're sort of, fate, like things are going to happen the same way every time, no matter what you do. Yeah. And no matter how you try to stop it, it just ends up happening anyway. But that is a really wonderful film. Time Crimes, love that movie. I've seen it many, many times, and I highly recommend it to anybody who likes science fiction. That's definitely one sort of a hidden gem.
Okay, I've certainly seen Time Crimes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, sure. And it's pretty good. And I'd certainly give it a thumbs up and recommend it to people. And it brings to mind the question, if you mention Time Crimes, a person has to say, have you seen the movie Primer?
Well, of course. I have seen Primer. It is on my top 25 list, but okay. Doesn't make my top 10. I do like that movie. It's one of those things where that movie is smarter than its audience, and I appreciate films that go for that aren't trying to like talk down to you and like over explain things and like, no, really, like as an example, I love the movie Inception, but oh my gosh, that movie is constantly pausing to explain to the audience what's happening right now. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, why do you keep doing that to me? But I know it's because probably some producer somewhere said, no, this is confusing. We need to constantly make sure the audience understands what's going on. Primer doesn't do that. It also is about time travel, but damn, is it confusing. It is like, in fact, you can go online and find just probably dozens or maybe even hundreds of videos and websites that have like mapped out for you what happens here and there and trying to make sense of it. It's very complex, very smart film. And I love that filmmaker. In fact, he has another one called Upstream Color, which I kind of like. I kind of like that movie better. That movie is also a bit of a puzzle. I love puzzle movies. That is a really good puzzle. And again, I think I figured it out. And I really love that movie.
Well, the thing about Primer is that it seems confusing and blah, 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 but it does make sense.
It does make sense.
The thing is, if you watch it 20 times and read all the supplemental jibber jabber, it makes sense. But the thing is with Primer, it makes the point that the instant you invented time travel, you'd be totally screwed forever and you'd be in hell, because as soon as it exists, that means someone in the future did take it and figure out how to go back and mess things up, and you're screwed.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the movie, you see these two entrepreneurs working in their garage like Steve Jobs. And then suddenly he's like, oh, why is my nose broken? Why am I bleeding? Why am I dead?
Why am I dead? Yeah, I mean, no, you're right. And see, that's what makes Primer very fascinating, because it's grounded in the real world. I mean, these two guys aren't even trying to create time travel. They're actually trying to build some other little widget. And they sort of accidentally discover, oh crap, I think we invented some kind of thing that went back in time. And then
Yeah.
it becomes this like, oh, now we've got to increase this, we've got to make this work. But again, it's sort of this cautionary tale of like, be careful of what you're doing, because
Well,
you're going to regret it.
well, also the thing is, the guys in Primer are venal douchebags,
Yeah.
right? It's like, remember that Steve Jobs didn't let his own children use his products because
Right.
he knew about neuroplasticity and addiction and dopamine,
Right.
right? So all these billionaires, it's like, it's okay for them to mess up the neural development of your kids,
But not
it's
theirs.
not good for their kids,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So, that's one thing Primer got right. Were all these people, these wacky nerds in their garages with their inventions, right? They're not good people. They're bad people,
Yeah.
like, billionaires, spoiler alert, billionaires are bad people,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Bruce Wayne is a fictitious character. there
Yeah.
are lots of billionaires in the world who can do amazing things, but none of them are out there fighting for the little guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, Bruce Wayne is a bad person too. It's like if you read The Dark Knight, Superman asks him, "Where do you want to have our showdown?" And he says, "Crime Alley, which is downtown, where the poor people live,
Right.
because heaven forbid property damage should come to the suburbs."
Right. Yeah. Some of it. Yeah. Some properties he probably owns. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 8 on the list is another Denis Villeneuve film. It's the sequel to Blade Runner called Blade Runner 2049. And I think I should say, like, again, I'm a huge Blade Runner fan. I'm literally obsessed with this film. And so I was sort of excited about the sequel, but also a little nervous about it. I ahead of time had sort of said in my mind, if they ever make a sequel, it should be about this. And
Right.
and then, well, good news, that's what it was about. So I was really like, oh, good, I called it. That's what it's about. So that was good. And but after I watched it in the theater, I did not like it. So I came out of the theater and I was kind of like, yeah, no, that didn't do it for me. But I slept on it. And actually that night I kept thinking about it. And by the time I woke up the next morning, I was like, you know what? I think that was a great movie. So I went and watched it again. And then I'm like, yeah, it is a good movie. So it didn't, I was not immediately sold on the film. I had to really think about it. And I don't want to give anything away, but it does a wonderful job. There's a bit of misdirection in the film, but it's very well done. And I think, if anything, actually, one of my problems with the film, if I could complain a little bit about it, is Harrison Ford. I kind of feel like the movie's about Kay. Kay is this android replicant who is a Blade Runner, and he knows who he is, and you really got to see the way people treat him. They spit on him. They hate him because he's a replicant, and he's programmed to hunt his own people, and so they hate him too. But he's desperate to be loved. He's desperate for identity. And then there's a beautiful moment in the film where he kind of starts getting some clues about what that could be. And it's really just a wonderful part of the storyline. And to me, the movie is best when it's focused on him. Thankfully, they don't bring Rick Deckard's character, played by Harrison Ford from the first film. They don't bring him in until probably the last third of the film.
Yeah.
But I still think he's in it too much. I don't need him to be in it. It doesn't need him to work to be a good film. But it doesn't ruin it either. I just kind of feel like maybe I think they felt some pressure that, well, this film won't be successful without Harrison Ford in it. And I think it's a great film all by itself, even without that. But they are sort of finishing up an unfinished plot line from the first film. So I guess that makes sense why he needs to be in the film. but I just love it again. Denis Villeneuve is wonderful director, gorgeous visuals again, amazing soundtrack. Does a pretty good job, I think, of following the visual cues of the first film, as sort of like making a world that feels real and lived in, that people really inhabit, a real place that you feel like you're there. And yeah, I really loved it. And I could even see the potential for a third film, although it didn't do well in the box office. So there's a chance we might not ever get another one. And maybe that's okay. But I did enjoy that movie a lot. I think it was one of the year it came out. I think it was probably one of the best films that came out that year.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, just in passing, I'll give our audience at home some homework, so you can play along at home. Keith said that, if I'm correct, Time Crimes, you said that's the best time travel movie.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely one of the best time travel films I've ever seen. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone who's listening to this, watch both movies, Time Crimes and Primer.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
that
go.
would be cool.
And then let us know which one you enjoyed more. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 7 is Alien, which we talked about in our last episode, so I don't need to go too far into that one. But Alien is a film that if you watched it today, this is a film made in like 1979, post-production 1978, and it looks like it was made yesterday. Just phenomenal in every level. I really, really love that movie. I think it's Ridley Scott, one of his best films. To be honest, and I think a lot of his films are hit and miss, but that was definitely one of his better ones. Love the movie. I think it works on many, many levels. We've already talked about it, so I just want to say that I think I didn't say this last time. What I like about the film is, one of the things I love about the film is that the first time you see it, it's not clear who the hero is. In fact, you probably assume it's the character Dallas, because he's like the commander, and played by Tom Skerritt, who, he's sort of the main. It's like if you're watching movies in the 70s, you're like, oh, I recognize him. Yeah, I know that guy. Yeah, he's probably the hero. And one by one, as characters start dropping off, it's suddenly like, oh, this female character, I've never seen this actress before in my life. Turns out she's the real star of this film. And I think at that time, that was one of the few. That made me one of the first times, like a large budget Hollywood film took a chance on an unknown female actress to be their action star, sort of lead in the film. And Ripley's character sort of sets the stage for later female characters who are strong female characters, like Linda Hamilton's character in Terminator 2, and some other films, that came after that. But anyway, I love Alien. I think it stands the test of time as a really great science fiction film.
Okay. I guess a lot of people have seen Alien. I'll say that I'll post a link when this goes on the old internet there, to a movie called Planet of the Vampires.
Right.
And Alien and Planet of the Vampires is a movie by Mario Bava, who made the movie Black Sunday with Barbara Steele, who also starred in David Cronenberg's Shivers. And he also made Black Sabbath, which is where the band got the name for their band from.
Right.
And Alien is a flaming ripoff of Planet of the Vampires. And they actually go back and steal more stuff from Planet of the Vampires for Prometheus.
Right.
And Planet of the Vampires, it's not made in America, which is kind of nice. No offense, but there's other countries, and they all wear these slick leather suits. The alien planet is all like red mist and really cool. And basically in Planet of the Vampires, which is definitely on my list of favorite science fiction movies, a spaceship hears a distress signal coming from a planet. They go there. They find a crashed spaceship. They find giant skeletons of the crew. They try to decipher their tech, and the tech is far beyond theirs. And they find tuning forks that they use to as locks, like musical notes.
Oh, cool.
Which is something they stole for Prometheus. And eventually their crew members die, and in the morning they are resurrected. But it turns out they're now being controlled by this other alien race that is basically pure mind, and just using their vessels, their bodies to look for planets to colonize.
Wow.
And it's one of these movies, and also, like Alien is about oral rape, which is kind of not fun to think about. So thankfully, Planet of the Vampires doesn't have that angle. Planet of the Vampires is one of these movies that has great science fiction ideas, but also has a great look to it. Like if you watch like a science fiction movie like Invaders from Mars, it's a science fiction, it's a Mars invasion movie, but it's told from the point of view of a kid pretty much. And when you're a kid, everything is strange to begin with.
Right.
And so the garish colors and the designs in Invaders from Mars really complements the strangeness of the story. And so Planet of the Apes, Planet of the Vampires, it's a great science fiction story, but it also looks and feels strange, which makes it compelling as well.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava.
There you go. Okay. Awesome. All right. So number 6 on my list is again Denis Villeneuve and his film Arrival. It's Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner are the main characters in it. It's based on a short story by a science fiction writer I highly recommend. His name is Greg Chang, and the story is really kind of different. Takes a slightly different angle. So the film is just sort of kind of based on the concept of the short story, but both are worth checking out. And so Arrival, on its surface, so there's sort of two things going on, but the sort of the main thing in front of you is that these ships appear all over the planet, strange looking kind of crafts that kind of just appear all over the planet. And different teams from different nations are sent to sort of investigate it, make contact. Each team makes contact, and they're talking to each other like, well, we learned this and we figured this out. And the main thing they're trying to figure out is the language, which I find really fascinating. We've talked about this before, that Stanislaw Lem in his book Solaris did this has a wonderful angle on this, which Arrival also adopts. This idea that if we ever encountered a truly alien race, communication, language would be the first major barrier. And of course, many opportunities to misunderstand one another in culture. By the way, quickly, in the movie Dune, there's a wonderful scene like that, where when the Emperor first meets Stilgar, who's the leader of the Fremen, which are the indigenous people of Dune, there's this moment when they're speaking to each other, meeting each other for the first time, where Stilgar does something which is interpreted by everybody, including the audience, as extremely offensive, to the point where people are drawing their weapons to we're gonna go to war now, and it's completely misunderstood. And without Duncan Idaho's character, he spent time with them, so he quickly explains, "Oh no, this is actually a sign of great respect and honor." But you need that interpreter. You need someone who spent time and understands the culture, because otherwise you would completely misunderstand it. And now imagine an alien culture where there is no ambassador and there is no bridge. Things intended as, oh, this is a great honor, this is a great blessing, this is a wonderful thing, a gesture, would almost invariably be interpreted the wrong way. So anyway, Arrival does a wonderful job about, number one, showing that first challenge of language, cracking the language code. And but then of course the aliens themselves are they're alien. And the way they perceive time is that they perceive time all at once. And so the code, the clue is in when Amy Adams' character, who's a linguist, when she figures out their language, what she figures out is the way they write their letters or write out their what they want to say, they start at the beginning and the end at the same time and then sort of meet in the middle. And she figures out it's because to them time is not linear. They understand everything at once. And so here's the crazy thing. I love this part of the film. As she begins to learn their language and speak their language, she begins to think like they do. She now begins to perceive time the way they perceive time. And now she is sort of floating in time. She's experiencing the past, the present, and the future all at the same time. Oh my gosh, I freaking love that. That is such a great concept. And anyway, I really love, there's so much heart to that story. I don't want to give anything away, but there's what they do with it and the way it plays out, I think is really smart. There is a problem. I'll just say my boys, I have two boys, and we watched that movie together, and they both don't like that there's sort of, the story hinges on something that kind of doesn't make sense. And I agree. I agree with them on that point. I think it could have been. I think the filmmakers could have had it hinge on a different point, and it still would have made more sense. It would have been less problematic. But in the end, it doesn't bother me. I guess when I add up all the things about the film that do work, that's one minor thing that I can overlook. Because I think everything else about it is so well done.
I wonder what that thing was. Wow.
Well, watch the film and you'll know what it is. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I did see it. I saw it when it came out. I don't think it made that much of an impression on me. And now that I remember it, yeah, Denis Villeneuve, I remember seeing the Blade Runner Part 2 movie, and I guess I didn't like it. And I remember there was some cruelty in it, I thought. Like, I seem to remember there was a bit with Jared Leto. And,
oh, yeah.
And I always think that if a time traveler from like the 30s came and watched our entertainment today, I think that's the first thing he'd notice. He'd say, "What's with all the cruelty? And like, how can you be entertained by this?"
Right.
And remember, I think Denis Villeneuve made a movie called Prisoners.
Yes.
Which had a fair bit of cruelty in it too. And it just seems weird that we're entertained by so much by cruelty today. Mm-hmm. That just seems kind of weird. But yeah, the thing about what you were saying there about language changing a person, that's a pretty cool idea. And like, that's something Noam Chomsky wrote a lot about is language learned or is it innate? Yeah. And do you have, what comes first, your ideas or the words to express the idea? And like, how can you have a thought if you don't have the words first?
Right.
And you know, how expanding your book, you know, how, you know, oftentimes, you know, there's, you know, like violence is kind of like a failure to communicate, not having the vocabulary to get your point across a different way.
Yeah.
So language is pretty interesting to think about. And, you know, it's funny, like, it's funny Arrival exists where we already had like 100 years of science fiction where Americans would meet aliens and the language barrier was no problem. All right.
Right. No, that's why I appreciate the film. I think it's like taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, it's not that it can't be that easy. It was no way it would be that simple.
Well, It still sounds goofy in the sense, if you want to think about that idea, it's like, think about, think about all the animals you stepped on today without even noticing it, like ants and beetles and like microscopic animals.
Right.
So like, if there was an alien race, basically it would be like like there's like biomes on the surface of your skin, and when you scratch it, there's all these bacteria that die, and like your skin is actually an organ. It's your largest organ, by weight, and it's doing all this stuff, and it's a dynamic system.
Right.
And your skin cells are always dying and flaking off and being replaced. And every time you scratch, there's these tiny little microscopic guys who are like, eh. Right?
Yeah.
So actual alien contact would be like that, where it wouldn't be even like a rival. It'd be like you don't know anything's happening, and suddenly it's just gone, right? Like you're just dead,
Right.
Or like, or like I've said before, like the Beothugs and the Micmacs, where like a huge percentage of North Americans were killed before they actually made contact with Europeans, because European germs, which they didn't have antibodies for, went on ahead of them.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to number 5 on our list. All right. So number 5 on my list is another film that I'm not sure how many people have heard of it. I don't typically meet people who have seen this film. But I think people who do see it, most people that I've talked to who have seen it, liked it. Maybe not as much as I do, but I really, really love this film. So number 5 on my list is a film called Under the Skin. It stars Scarlett Johansson, and I think there's some films that I tend to appreciate as a writer. I think we've talked about this before. Like, for example, the film Memento, Christopher Nolan's film about a guy that has memory issues, and the way it's filmed in reverse. So at the beginning of every scene, this is actually the scene that came before that scene that you just watched, but you're usually suddenly in a different place and you don't know what's going on. But that's the way you would feel if you also every few minutes lost your short-term memory.
Yeah.
So you as the viewer are constantly experiencing what the main character is experiencing in every scene, and it's being told backwards. And I remember the first time I watched that in the theater, I was in awe of trying to figure out if someone told me, Keith, I want you to write a screenplay like this, I would be like, where do you even begin? Oh my gosh. I was just in awe of the way the screenwriter, Jonathan Nolan, who's a phenomenal screenwriter, by the way, put that together. But Under the Skin is similar to me in the way I was watching this film, and the way it is filmed, all of the narrative, all of the storytelling is done sort of in this abstract, oblique way. Nothing is directly communicated to you through dialogue. You're watching this film, you're just watching things happen, and you are constantly going, what the hell is this? Why are they doing it? Who's that? Why are they doing this? Where am I now? Who are these people? And then the film doesn't care. It just keeps going. And so, now this is happening. Well, why is that happening? Wait, what's that? And it just takes its time. It lets things play out. And you as the viewer, and you either love this or hate this, but I love this, that it constantly is forcing you to pay attention to every little detail. What's going on? Why? Who is this person? Why are they doing this? What is their motivation? What's going to happen next? And not everything is answered, because no one ever says, this here is this, and we're doing this so we can do that. It's just, you just kind of absorb it, and it's so incredible to me, the way that story is told. I'm really kind of, again, in awe of the way the director tells the story and chooses to tell the story this way. Excuse me. So, pardon me. Getting choked up. So part of the way the movie is filmed, so there's scenes where Scarlett Johansson's character is driving around in a van, and you see her driving around, and the camera's sort of in the van with her, and you see her she's just driving around, and then she'll pull up, she'll see somebody walking on the sidewalk or someone that's standing at a crosswalk or whatever, or whatever. She'll pull up and roll down the window and just kind of start talking to them. Hey, do you know where this is? I can't find this. Or are you from around here? Blah, blah, blah. And eventually they get in the car. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. And then they just start talking. And it feels like it feels very real. It doesn't feel scripted at all. Well, the funny thing is those scenes are not scripted. Those people are actual, just average people walking on the sidewalk. And she is randomly talking to total strangers, and they're jumping in the van with her and having real conversations. They don't even know they're in a movie. So that was really fascinating, that the director, he wanted it to feel real, so that he actually went to that level of having those certain scenes be with real people who are having real reactions and having a real sort of unscripted conversation. And so that was really interesting. But it's, I don't want to give much of it away, because it's just really it's odd. I'll tell you right now, there'll be things happening in that movie, but what the hell is this? But I loved it from beginning to end, and the ending is pretty shocking. But really good. I think it's a very, very fascinating film. I guess I could also say, since it is a science fiction, it does sort of deal with alien contact. If I could probably say that. Yeah. But again, from the perspective of sort of the aliens, and you kind of not knowing what the hell they're doing here, why they're doing what they're doing. And in a way, that's sort of real as well. I mean, if we take analogies, let's say, if we go into the rainforest and we encounter some very primitive, Papua New Guinea tribe that's never had contact with the outside world before. Think of how they would look at us and how they would try to, what are we doing? Why are we there? What's that thing we're holding? And why are we going over there? Why are we digging on the ground? Why are we looking at the sky? And they wouldn't understand almost anything was going on. And that's okay. I guess do they need to know? But there would be that sort of curiosity and that not getting it. And so you kind of get a little bit of that, we don't fully understand what they're doing. We're not really sure why they're there, why they're here, what their goals are. But anyway, I love that movie. And I will say quickly, just because it's my only chance to probably mention it, it's not on my top 10, but it is definitely another one of those obscure films that I highly recommend. And it is a science fiction film. It's called Coherence. Love this movie. Coherence is definitely a film you need to watch. Go find it, seek it out and watch this film. Coherence, another low budget film by an independent filmmaker. And the way he filmed this movie is what initially drew me to the film. I was reading about it, and the way the director filmed this movie, most of the movie happens in someone's house at a dinner party. And so one by one, people are showing up to the party and they walk in the door, hey, how you doing? And then you kind of just pick up as they're talking to each other, who they are to each other and why they're there and how they know each other and blah, blah, blah. And then as the film progresses, strange things start happening and they have these reactions. So the way the director filmed that movie, Coherence, is he gave note cards to each actor of this is who your character is. And in this scene coming up, you need to say these 2 or 3 things. You need to mention this and this and that, but he doesn't tell them when to say it. It's not scripted after they say that, now it's your line. They're left open to figure out the cues based on what everybody else is saying at the dinner party. So, that actor might know, okay, I'm supposed to talk about back when I was an understudy for a ballerina in this dance, but I didn't get the part. And then I need to talk about this vacation that I took with my boyfriend. And then I need to talk about a book I was reading. And that's it. And so action right now. So now they're talking at the dinner party and people are talking. And then as someone else is telling a story, it's like, oh, that kind of connects to what I was probably going to say. So then they would go like you would in a real conversation. Hey, that reminds me of this. Oh, you know what? That's just like this other thing. And so again, it's left open for the actors to sort of, as their characters, to figure out where the conversation is going to go and what's going to play into the next thing. And so you end up with the feeling like these really are friends. They really do know each other. And the conversations they're having really are spontaneous. It doesn't feel scripted or acted, and because it isn't in most, as much as it can be. And so, yeah, I really love that movie. It kind of plays out a bit like a Twilight Zone episode in a way. But if you love the Twilight Zone and you love those kind of like weird Twilight Zone kind of storylines, you will love Coherence. Highly recommend it. Go watch that movie.
Okay. I saw Under the Skin, and I guess it wasn't for me. I just couldn't really connect with it, and I guess it's just not for me.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Now, yeah. So I was like, why am I looking at the screen when I could be looking out my window at birds?
Right.
That was me. Now I'm just going to jump in here because I'm so curious. I'm curious. Have you seen the movie Source Code?
Oh yes. No, I love Duncan Jones. Right. Yes, I do like Source Code.
Yeah. Before that, he made a movie called Moon, which I guess you saw, right?
I also saw Moon, and I liked it. I didn't love it. I kind of like Source Code better because I felt like it sort of had a point. But Moon was interesting. It just kind of like, to me, it was like within the first probably 5 minutes of that movie, I had figured out what was going to happen. And yep, that's what happens. The end.
Well, it's funny. Like Moon is a movie that has a shocking twist ending, right? And
does it though? I don't think it's that shocking.
Okay,
I kind of saw it coming.
Right. Well, in the pitch meeting, they said it was a shocking twist.
Okay,
ending,
yes,
right?
They intended it to be, yes.
Yeah, and the thing is, the shocking twist ending, I'm like, oh wow, I couldn't care less. Right. But it doesn't matter because it just looked good, and it was authentic and convincing.
Yeah.
And basically the whole thing about am I a robot or am I a person, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that always bores me to tears anyhow. But the bit where basically it's about a guy who is living on the moon, and he, obviously the director cared enough to get the details right and the loneliness right. And the guy could have been like a lighthouse keeper or like doing fire watch in the national park there, right? Any job where you're just lonely, right? So Moon's pretty solid. And then Source Code is kind of fun in the sense that it relies on a whole bunch of exposition and mumbo jumbo to make it all work, right? Mm-hmm. And then you kind of have to hit pause and say, okay, am I buying this mumbo jumbo they're laying down, right? And it's kind of funny. There was a director who's all forgotten now, Ken Russell. Where back in the day, like he was the wild man and made wild movies, right? And he made a movie with William Hurt called Altered States.
Oh yeah, no, I love. Yeah, that's a good movie. I like that movie.
Right. And one time I had a roommate, and he said that movie had too much mumbo jumbo, right? Too much like explaining about how this is going to blow your mind, right? And like William Hurt basically lecturing to the camera about his super experiments, right? And I'm like, no, it's Ken Russell. Buy your ticket and take your ride, right? So it's kind of a funny science fiction problem that other genres don't have. Like if you're watching a movie about a divorce, there's nothing in there that, like, it'd be well done, but there's nothing there where you're like, what the hell? I've never heard of that before. What do you mean a flux capacitor, right?
Right.
But the thing is, in source code, you can actually try to figure it all out, or just say, yeah, mad scientist, he's kind of a ghost, whatever, go with it.
Yeah.
Right. And the movie does have the the ticking time bomb, literally,
Yep.
and a guy who, the classic ordinary guy in an extraordinary situation, trying to figure out what's going on, where you're like, great, love it, go,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that movie for a couple of reasons. One, I liked the way it slow plays the the setup. Like in the beginning, it's just a guy wakes up in a dark room and doesn't know where he is, and he's talking to some voice, and what he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And then these things he keeps reliving this moment over and over again, and time, like you said, time is ticking, and but he's got questions like, okay, yeah, but where am I, and how did I get in here, and when can I get out, and so I like that. I like how it sort of plays sort of his personal paranoia with the mission that he's trying to solve, et cetera. And then you slowly over the course of like first half of the movie kind of piece everything together. And then there's a big, oh, holy crap, here's what's really going on. But what I also love about the movie, without giving too much away, near the ending, there is a what I would call a Philip K. Dick moment. In fact, I even said that when I was watching the movie. When this thing happened in the movie, I was like, oh, holy crap, there's your Philip K. Dick moment right there. Where in essence, I think this is what they're trying to say, that because this guy is sort of reliving a certain timeline over and over again, because he makes a different decision in the timeline than he made in real life, he creates another timeline. He creates another reality that now he continues to live in. And I kind of love that. I kind of love that they went that way with it. That was an unexpected thing that I was like, oh, like, because up to this point, they're trying to base it in, oh, this is scientific thing and blah, 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 and whatever, even if that doesn't work all the way. Because if you think about it too much, it's like, wait a minute, what? But I liked that it kind of made that sort of turn into Philip K. Dick world, reality. That was kind of a nice touch for me. And so out of all of Duncan Jones' films, Moon and that one, and there's another one called Mute that I think is on Netflix that no one should ever watch. It's really, really bad. But it does connect the universes. So Duncan Jones says that all of his films sort of exist in the same universe. There's a scene in Mute where Sam Rockwell's character is seen and like on a billboard about the news story about an astronaut returning to Earth and exposing this cloning program that was illegal. And they're like, oh, hey, that's from Moon. It doesn't save this horrible film, unfortunately. But anyway, we digress. Wow. Let's move on. Number 4 on my list, my top sci-fi films of all time. And many people would probably, I've even had people say to me, that's not a science fiction film. And I would argue that it absolutely is a science fiction film for many reasons. It's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So screenplay written by one of my all-time favorite screenwriters. We should do a series on him once in a while or down the road. Charlie Kaufman. I absolutely love Charlie Kaufman. This film was probably, no, not the first one. I think I saw Adaptation before that, and I love Adaptation. That movie is great. Yeah, we need to do a Charlie Kaufman episode, I'm realizing now, one of these days. But anyway, Eternal Sunshine, screenplay by Charlie Kaufman, directed by Michel Gondry, who is the perfect director for this film. There's a lot of practical effects, which is really what makes the movie kind of work. And then the setup of the film is, it's kind of set, it's not in a science fiction setting. It's actually kind of like the world we live in now. So it doesn't feel, it's not the future. It's not even the near future. It's just a very ordinary world that we live in right now. But sort of the science fiction element is there's some doctor who's figured out a procedure where he can map out your memories and erase someone and all memories of someone from your mind. And he basically, he does infomercials and he sells them, people come into his little crappy office and make an appointment and they want to erase painful memories usually, right? The memory of someone that died, like a child that died or a dog that died or a failed relationship or, something the memories are really, really painful and you would rather just never have had those memories. Well, so he can do that. He'll erase all traces of this memory of this person from your mind. And so in the story, Jim Carrey's character is erased by his girlfriend. And so he decides to erase her too. Like, oh, you erase me, I'm going to erase you. And then it's from his perspective, you're kind of going through his memories as they're being erased. And about halfway through the procedure, he's like, you know what? I changed my mind. I don't want to do this. As painful as this was, I still want to hold on to these memories. And so he begins to sort of like try to evade the machine in his mind and hold on to the memories and not allow them to be erased. And so, that's sort of the science fiction-y element of it, but it's really more a film about love and, the sort of the good and the bad of relationships, that, I think it has a beautiful message. And that, honestly, that movie, I saw it in the theater by myself. And when it was over, it's very difficult to say a film. It's not very often that a film has this effect on me, but I would say that film profoundly moved me and like sort of changed me. Like, I probably for days after that film, I just began to really appreciate the people in my life who love me in spite of how difficult I can be sometimes, and they just choose to love me anyway. That's kind of one of the messages of the film, of sort of deciding, hey, love is not easy, and none of us is easy to love all the time. But choosing to love somebody in spite of that, in spite of the pain or the flaws or the difficulty. I just love that movie. I think it's a really beautiful film. And the way it's shot is also really fascinating. You think when you watch the film, the first time through anyway, you think you're coming into the beginning of the story, but the beginning of the film is really sort of the end of the film. And it sort of like, again, plays out two different storylines at the same time until they kind of converge. So I like that. I like the way it's done, and you're kind of left to figure it out as it's being played out. But I think that's a beautiful movie. I love that film.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I don't think I ever will. I have a good Jim Carrey story for you.
Okay.
So I never had too much luck so far making money from writing. So what I did my whole life, I'd sort of get a day job that was kind of tough, and then kind of quit it and write full time and coast for a while, then be homeless, and then get a job, and then have all these ups and downs and stuff. And I remember one time I saw an interview with Jim Carrey, and they said to him, "What do you think you would have done if it hadn't worked out for you in showbiz, if your dream hadn't come true?" And Jim Carrey said, "I'd be working at DeFasco." And I saw him say this in an interview. And at the time he said that, and I saw him say this, I was working at DeFasco.
Wow.
So basically, where I am right now, Lake Ontario sort of comes to a little bit of a point at its western edge. And picture my hand is Lake Ontario. It's like Toronto, Oakville, Mississauga, Hamilton. No, Toronto, Mississauga, Oakville, Burlington, Hamilton, Niagara Falls, Buffalo.
Okay.
Okay. So Hamilton made a lot of steel. It's a steel town like Pittsburgh. And DeFasco was founded in 1912, Dominion Foundry and Castings Company. And in the 80s, Jim Carrey was in Burlington, and his sister was a bus driver in Burlington. And in the 80s, he was doing stand-up at Mark Reslin's Yuck Yucks, and was living in a station wagon. And at night, he would look across Hamilton Harbor and see the glowing slag heaps and the gas fires of DeFasco. And he'd say, if this doesn't work out, that's where I'm going to be.
Right.
And then and he had a wife at the time who was supporting him. And then when he got rich and famous, he got rid of her and upgraded.
Right.
And then I wound up at DeFasco. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well,
Okay, so
I
number three.
recommend Eternal Sunshine. I think you would like it. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, he sure has a rubbery face, which is
Yeah. No, here's what's
yeah.
interesting. Here's what's interesting about Eternal Sunshine too. Speaking about the typical Jim Carrey film, Kate Winslet plays the Jim Carrey character in this movie, and Jim Carrey plays the Kate Winslet character in this movie. Meaning he is completely, he's not goofy, he's not silly, he doesn't make funny faces. He's really dull and boring and sad and depressed and plays it totally straight. Kate Winslet's character is she's the crazy one. She dresses weird, she acts weird, she does crazy stuff. She's the weird one. So it's really an interesting kind of reversal of what your expectations might be of the characters in the film.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to think about how that art form works in terms of typecasting and how people lock into faces.
Right.
And you can't say it's a tragedy because he's a multimillionaire, but
Right.
Jim Carrey's a guy who had this skill set where he had a face like Plastic Man with the faces, right?
Right.
And fart jokes and whatever.
Yeah.
So he has a huge hit playing the pet detective and In Living Color.
Sure.
And then it turns out, wow, he's actually a really intelligent guy. He has other interests. He wants to do thrillers, like that 23 movie he did and all this stuff.
Right.
And the people are like, no, just do the fart jokes, like just that, right? So it's kind of funny how that happens to people. Some people get typecast and some don't, right?
Right.
And
well,
it's like, I remember there was one time when the Batman TV show was on, and Adam West as Batman was on the cover of Life magazine, and he's like, hey, I'm on the cover of Life magazine, and the producer of Batman, William Dozier, said to him, there were 17 different Tarzans, kid.
Right.
Right, which is brutal, right?
Right.
It's like after Jaws came out, Roy Scheider got a big ego, right? And people didn't want to work with him because of his new attitude. Yeah. And people would say, bro, they went to see the shark.
Right.
They didn't go to.
Yeah.
Right. but he's like, no, Jaws is a Roy Scheider movie. And
right.
Like, Roy, who?
Exactly.
Right? And it's funny, like so Adam West couldn't escape typecasting, but like Leonard Nimoy, he went pretty much straight from Star Trek to Mission Impossible, and Columbo and theater, and he kind of managed to actually get out of that. But some people don't, right?
Yeah, he was really good in Fringe too, by the way. Love that TV show Fringe. He was really good in that too. So yeah, Robin Williams had the same kind of problem, I think. When Robin Williams first made in fact, his first film, Moscow on the Hudson, flopped because people went to it thinking it was going to be this really hilarious comedy.
Sure. Like, how do you
and it's not funny at all. And there are no funny bits at all. And it's actually kind of depressing. But you know what? Robin Williams managed to, he ended up making Dead Poet Society, which was like huge. What's the one? Awakenings. Oh my gosh, I love Awakenings. That's a wonderful
actually movie. It's kind of funny. The only Christopher Nolan movie that I could possibly stand to watch has Robin Williams in it. Insomnia.
That's a remake. The original one is way better.
It is.
Insomnia, the original, is way better.
Man, I totally believe you, but it's a really good setup, right?
No, it's a great setup. Yeah.
Yes, and just their meeting where he's like, guess what? Hi, I'm the serial killer you're hunting. It's me, but I know what you did, so shake.
Right. Yeah. You don't tell me, and you won't tell me. I won't tell on you. Yeah.
Yeah. You can trust me.
Right. All right. Yeah. So I'm rounding out the top 3 here on my list, on my top 10 list. So my number 3 on my top sci-fi films list is one that I also, and this happens to me a bit. You're probably maybe noticing a pattern. When I first saw the film, I did not like it. and I kind of was like, what's the hype? I don't know why people think this movie is so great. And so it's called Her, and Spike Jonze directs, and he's good. I think Spike Jonze is a really great director, and Joaquin Phoenix is in it. Actually, Amy Adams is in that one also, and
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of great actors are in the film actually. Anyway, first time I saw it, I just kind of was like, it's just kind of gimmicky. It's about this like AI in the future, like a personal assistant that people fall in love with it and blah blah blah. And, like I thought, that's kind of goofy. And I don't know why, but I gave it another shot. I went and watched it again, and it got me. I was like, you know what? I totally missed all of the layers of what's happening in the film. It really, so for me, I had to overlook the gimmicky part of it. I felt like the gimmick part of it was like, I thought that was the point. And that's not the point. The point really is human beings and their inability to connect with other human beings and be vulnerable with each other. And actually it's working on a whole lot of levels. So there's a lot of emotional stuff, a lot of psychology going on. And I think probably the reason I gave it another shot was that I have become convinced that one of the greatest living actors of at least probably my lifetime, or at least living actor, let's say at least living actors at this point, is Joaquin Phoenix. I have just really fallen in love with him as an actor. I would highly recommend, if you want to see the range and scope of him as an actor, watch him in The Master with Philip Seymour Hoffman. Watch him in a movie called You Were Never Really Here. And then watch him in a movie called Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, which is a gorgeous movie. Beautiful, beautiful film. And watching him in those three movies, I think I did watch those three movies almost back to back, or, within days of each other. And I was in awe of how those felt like three different people. Like, I had to remind myself, these are all Joaquin Phoenix. He really is playing these different, and he plays them all so differently. It was just masterful to see how he really became this other person in each of those films. And so that's probably why I think after I watched those, I was like, I'm going to give Her another chance because he's in that movie. And then going back to watch Her for the second time with a stronger appreciation for Joaquin Phoenix as an actor, I think that's when I really started to understand what that movie is really about. And again, I think probably similar to Eternal Sunshine, maybe even similar to like Arrival and other films like that, where the science fiction element is really just a way to tell the story, but the story in itself isn't necessarily a science fiction story. It just, the science fiction element allows us to get some distance from maybe the subject matter and to look at it from an objective standpoint, where I think we can process what's being said a little bit easier. So anyway, yeah, I'm in awe of that film. I really love that movie now. It's just a very beautiful movie about being human and being loved and allowing yourself to be loved. So yeah, I love Her.
Cool.
Have you seen that?
Okay. I have not. So I can't comment. So what's up for number 2?
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of cheat here because I'm gonna you did this. I think you did this in the last episode.
Cheated?
Oh, cheated in the sense of I'm not gonna pick a number 1 or a number 2. I'm gonna say there's a tie.
Actually, I think if you ask me my favorite movies, I'm pretty sure there's an actual 3-way tie for number 1.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is allowed.
Sure.
So I've already, it's no secret that I've already said it many times in this podcast, and I've certainly said it even in this episode, how much I love Blade Runner. I am obsessed with Blade Runner. This thing over my shoulder is a Blade Runner print from an artist. Over here you can't see it, but over to my right, there's a whole bookcase full of Blade Runner, the spinner car, magazines, action figures, posters, vehicles, books, art books, on and on and on. I mean, I've become obsessed with the movie Blade Runner. So I love that movie. I don't know what else I could say about it. I mean, I think we've already talked about it a couple episodes back when we talked about Stalker, and we ended up talking about Blade Runner a little bit. So I don't need to rehash any of that. I think the film is beautiful. To me, it's sort of a work of art. It's beautiful visually. It's beautiful. The dialogue is poetic, I think, and beautiful. The music is incredible. It's definitely one of these things where each of the elements of it are masterful and are well done. You know, the music, the sets, the cinematography, the dialogue. But when you put it all together, you know, it sort of transcends all the sum of its parts. And so I just love Blade Runner. Anyway, not more to say about that. So, but at the same time, as I am sort of obsessed with the film, I don't think it's the greatest film ever made. So don't hear me saying that I think there could never be a better science fiction film made than Blade Runner, because it does have flaws and it's not perfect in every way. I just really appreciate it, and I just have a strong appreciation for the film on all those levels. But a film that has slowly risen on my list, and every time I see this movie, it gets inches closer and closer to the number one spot, to the point where right now it is sort of tied with Blade Runner, and I could eventually see it easily taking the number one slot on my list. And because in a way it's kind of in a way it's kind of a sort of another take on a Blade Runner kind of a story. So the movie is called Children of Men, and it's much more, so it is set in the future, but it's sort of, you know, kind of like a couple of years into the future. And it's an older film, which is really fascinating, because when it came out, it may be like 10 years old now. I remember when it came out, I was watching it and thinking, this could so easily be our future. Like, it almost unnerved me and disturbed me that I'm watching this very dystopian future in that movie and thinking to myself, it wouldn't take much for us to live in that movie and live in that world that we're seeing in this movie. And I think that's why every time I watch it, it moves up on my list, because I realize every time I watch it how much I am living in that world. We are moving towards that kind of a world. And yeah, so the premise for the film, it's based on I think it's P.D. James
Yeah, it is.
story, which again, you would think, what? He didn't write science fiction. So it's based on this, the story, the idea that in the future, basically nobody can have children anymore. And the book doesn't deal so much with why. It's sort of a mystery. So all you know is that no more babies are being born. The youngest person alive is sort of a celebrity now. He's a douchebag, but he's famous because he's baby Diego. He's the youngest, you know, he was the last human to be born, basically. So he's the youngest person alive. And so, you know, it's sort of dealing with what happens to society when everyone knows that the world is ending. You know, as every person dies, we get closer and closer to the last human beings alive. Like, humans as a race we're going extinct, and we can't solve the problem. And we're just slowly watching our society fall apart and crumble. And it sort of, you know, creates this kind of like, so what, right? Why bother? Why are we going to work every day? Why am I still, you know, what's the point of getting married? What's the point of, because you can't have kids and you know you're all going to die. And so, but you know, society's trying to hold on. We're trying to kind of keep going in spite of this very bleak inevitability of the end of the human race. And it kind of follows this character who is kind of like there, but he's not hanging on by a thread. so much because of that as he is because his son died even before this happened. His son died at a young age, and his marriage broke apart. And he's been going to work wondering, why am I still alive for a longer than for even longer than this. So this is just another thing to add on the pile. Yeah. Oh, by the way, and the human race is ending. And I don't know. It's just it works on some really interesting levels. It's also very well directed. There's several, on a technical side of things, there are 2 or 3 long shots, where basically long takes, where this is when the camera just rolls and things are happening and there's no cuts. And so there's a whole lot of coordination that needs to happen. And of course, one thing goes wrong and the whole thing is ruined. You got to go back and start over again, right? But there's several of those kind of long takes in the film, which really add to the feeling that you're really in this film. It really is happening in the moment. And if you're not careful, that kind of thing can pull you out of the film. It can make you be like, you start getting kind of like wowed and going, whoa, how did he do that? And you're like, well, now all of a sudden I realize I'm watching a movie and I'm paying attention to how did the director pull this off. And so that's the danger of that sometimes. So maybe, the first time I saw the film, I wasn't aware that, oh, by the way, this movie has several very technically difficult to pull off long takes. I just watched it and experienced it. And it was after I watched it that I was like, oh my gosh, there's no cuts in that scene. How in the world did he do that? And it has again, without giving anything away, it has probably one of the most beautiful scenes I have ever seen in any film ever, science fiction or otherwise. Just a very, very beautiful film, which again, I think just reminds us of what's important in life. And, but at the same time, as beautiful and sort of surprising as this very beautiful human moment is in the film, you feel like time stops in this moment. And it's this very beautiful kind of thing that's everybody's experiencing. And then it's sort of like it doesn't last. It's like, and then everyone goes back to shooting each other and killing each other. And it's sort of like, yeah. And that is, unfortunately, that's the human race. That may be why we're doomed, even if we solve the problem of women not being able to have children anymore, because we're sort of immune to, I don't know, we're sort of immune to beauty. We're immune to these sort of transcendent things that should bring us together, that should make us more aware of our shared humanity. But it seems like we have a very short memory when it comes to those things. We can overlook that so quickly and move back into trying to kill each other. But anyway, it's I love that movie. And so I would say Children of Men and Blade Runner right now are tied for my #1 slot.
Okay, it sounds like you misgendered P.D. James there when you said he.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the P stands for Phyllis.
Yes.
And she was born in Oxford in 1920 and died in Oxford in 2014, and had quite the long life. Pretty cool person.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't see the movie, but on the one hand, it's a really sad problem, and it always seems to me like if you want to talk about serious science fiction stuff, it seems like all roads lead back to J.G. Ballard, because all these points you're talking about, he was there ahead of all of us.
Yeah.
And the goofy thing about Children of Men is the idea that for fertility rates to collapse, you would need any sort of science fiction premise at all. When the
Right.
reality is way more banal.
Right.
Right. Like I was just reading an article about how young men today who should be virile and potent and dangerous, a whole generation of them need injections of vitamin D. Because I have coworkers who are 24 and like I said, when Joseph Conrad was 24, he was risking his life halfway around the world, looking for adventure. When they leave work, they go home to a basement with blackout curtains and play video games and never go outside, never see the sun. Right.
Right.
And so they have no vitamin D, they're obese, they have no testosterone. So, so it's like not only, does their, apparatus not work, so they can't reproduce because they never see sunshine and they're addicted to porn.
Right.
They actually have, have less testosterone in their blood, so they're at this huge disadvantage.
Yeah.
And J.G. Ballard had an equation where he said sex plus technology equals the future. And you remember how in the 80s there was this debate between VHS and beta,
Right.
right? And maybe I'll buy both so I don't get out in the cold, right?
Right.
And then VHS won, so you had to throw your beta out, right? And the reason VHS won is because the porn industry went with VHS.
Right.
Right.
Well,
So
there's a
J.G.
whole,
Ballard said,
there's a whole thing actually. I'm not sure how far I should go get into this, but there is I've read some essays about how the porn industry has influenced technological advancement and achievement in ways that the average person is unaware of, and that's
very
one of
much
them.
so,
That's
yeah.
one of those. But that is actually true.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we're listing our favorite science fiction movies when porn is a much more popular genre.
Mhm. I don't have a top 10 porn list.
Right. But look at us in comic books, right? Nobody
Right.
cares about comic books. Like porn's where it's at, but no one talks about it, right?
Right.
So J.G. Ballard said, sex plus technology equals the future, right? So it's like you think, oh wow, for for the for Homo sapiens to become sterile, it would take some neutron bomb, like in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. No, it just takes porn and video games and lack of vitamin D
Right.
and high fructose corn syrup,
Right.
and all this nonsense, right? It's just the saddest thing. And J.G. Ballard, back in the past, in 1970, he also said, one thing I know for sure, the future will be boring.
Yep.
Right. And it's funny, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, if you watch a movie, you can watch these superheroes who are like, oh, it's horrible, who are like dressed up like a flamboyant luchadors, jumping and leaping and breathing fire. But if they were watching you, they would just see this inert meat puppet with one hand down his pants,
Yeah.
like a rock, right? There's nothing, right? And when I was 20, I stole a car for no reason, right? And that, and I stayed up for 6 days without sleeping, right? And now at my job, I talk to 20-year-olds and I'm like, so what do you do? And they're like, nothing. I just stay in the basement and do this, right?
Right.
And I'm like, do you ever talk to girls? I'm like, no, right? I'm like, you haven't stolen a car? You haven't, like, no, what, right? And they're boring, and it's boring, right?
Yeah.
And it's like again, like I said, if you look at what someone like Joseph Conrad was doing when he was 20,
Mhm.
right? Compared to a 20-year-old in 2021, it's like pretty lame.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
so that's one thing where science fiction can't keep up with science fact,
Mm.
where a science fiction writer says, oh wow, what if in the future and it's sad, what if everyone doesn't have kids, the greatest joy in life,
Right.
right? How sad is that,
Yeah.
right? Well, you'd have to have some great science fiction gimmick to explain. It's like, no, it's just sad.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
That's it.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I appreciate in Children of Men, they don't try to explain it. It is sort of a mystery. No one knows why. It just happens, and, but what's fascinating to me about that is sort of like how society reacts to that. Um, when people feel like there's no hope and no future, and why are we doing this, right? Different people have different reactions. So some people decide, well, screw it, let's just blow up the world. So you've got these sort of like terrorist groups running around, blowing everything up because who cares? Nothing matters anymore, and it's all going to burn anyway. So let's just burn it down. Some people just kind of, and all this stuff is very believable, right? I think this is all very, very, very believable. Some people just go like they're in denial. They just keep getting up and going to work every day, going to their jobs, and going out to eat and all this stuff, but sort of like pretending that the world isn't ending. Let's just keep moving anyway. Um,
Well, it's funny too. Like basically, there's good reason to think that the human race is going to destroy itself, right?
one way or the
Um,
other, yeah.
yeah. And it's like, wow, why can't we stop it? And the reason we can't stop it is because in that little sliver, just before we destroy ourselves, a few people are going to get insanely rich off it,
Right.
right? And there's no way they're like handing over the reins,
No,
right?
I think that is exactly right. That
That's it.
that is true of almost every major problem we could point to in the world today, is that we could solve world hunger, except for the fact that a handful of people are getting super rich on the fact that food is
Like a literal
difficult.
handful,
Yeah.
like literal handful. Like I mean, 8 people whose
Yeah.
names you know.
Yep. Oh yeah. And this is the reason why, we can't cure real simple diseases in Africa like malaria, which is take a little shot, a little shot that costs like 30 cents. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are things that we as humanity could solve, but for the fact that there are a handful of people making a whole lot of money who it's in their best interest that we don't solve these problems. But
You know
that's
what's
not,
funny?
I would say that's not the only reason though, because I do think um, there's a lack of a strong sort of a grassroots sort of a will of the people of outrage to say, no, we hate this. This is wrong. We're gonna protest this. We're gonna fight this. This is a problem we must solve. We have to solve, and we're not going to take no for an answer. We're going to be relentless about it. Like, I think there is just sort of a complacency as well from the average person of like, oh well, we can't change it. Oh well, it's just the way it is. And so we kind of float along with the status quo. Um,
Well, first off,
for better or worse.
back in the 20th century, that ship has sailed. There was a debate in the 20th century about who got it right, Brave New World or 1984. And then 1984, he said the future is a boot continually grinding into a human face on the pavement. And then Aldous Huxley, who was a lot smarter, he's like, no, no, no. You don't need violence to enslave people as long as you give them universal basic income, free internet, and free porn.
Yeah, and drugs
That's
that
it. It's
they
over.
pacify them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's over. So give them free drugs and free porn, and you've won,
But
right?
here's the thing. I would say it isn't an either or. I think they both were right in some ways. I think we do have oppressive empire governments that lie to their people, manipulate the media and the information, and engage in sort of double speak, decide that they're at war with this nation, but then decide, oh no, now they're our friends, and just kind of turn on a dime, all these kinds of things where I go back and rewrite some historical things that they don't like because it makes them look bad, or they want to just change the narrative.
Oh,
I think 84 is right, and I think Brave New World is right. I think they were both sort of two sides of the same coin, and in some ways we have both going on.
well, it's funny. I think I've mentioned this before, but George Orwell. It's sad. He's written like I think he wrote a lot of great novels besides 1984, like Keep the Aspidistra Flying and all that stuff. But he's just a 1984 guy, right? Which is kind of tough, right? And in terms of that stuff you're saying, it's like I don't like any government. I don't like government politicians. I promise you I'll never vote again for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
If only I could be left alone in return. But I remember reading one time Martin Luther said, if he knew for sure, they said, if you knew for sure Jesus was going to return tomorrow, what would you do? And Martin Luther said he would plant a tree.
Right.
And then today, people are like, well, why bother conserving a tree if I'm going to be raptured tomorrow? Right?
Right.
What a waste of time. Right? Why care about, littering if the rivers are going to turn to blood and the moon's going to catch fire?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And in my lifetime, something happened that never happened before. Starting in the 1980s, I'd have coworkers who were a generation older, and they'd say to me, don't get married, don't have kids. Kids are expensive. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And from, let's say, Adam and Eve until that time, like my lifetime, it's like, well, of course you're going to have kids. What do you think you're alive for, right?
Right.
You plant a tree so that your great grandchildren can sit in its shade.
Right.
Right. But then once I started working, I had all these coworkers who were like, don't have kids, don't bother, it's not worth it, kids are too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And a lot of people took their advice.
Right.
And imagine any other generation from Adam and Eve to today saying, yeah, I think I'll skip out on having kids because it costs too much. Right.
Right.
When it's obviously the greatest joy in your life, right?
Right. Well,
Right.
it's
So
also
instead,
that
what happens? All these guys I know who didn't have kids, now that disposable income that should went for diapers, they spend on lightsabers and replicas of the WWF Championship belt, right?
right. Yeah.
Right. And instead of having kids, they take the discretionary income and go on eBay and buy back the toys they had in 1980 that their mom threw out.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's like, you wonder why I'm depressed here.
Yes.
Get me out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think just putting another plug in, if there's anybody listening to this who has not read 1984 or Brave New World, or I would add to that Fahrenheit 451, I think it's actually a good idea to read all three of those, like once a year or every other year. Like I try to read them on a regular basis, especially Fahrenheit 451. I think every time I have read Fahrenheit 451, I read it and then I say, actually all three of them, I read them and I go, how did they know? Like all three of them, I think, sort of captured a piece of the world we live in today. Or I think they're all three very sort of prophetic books that in an odd way, it's odd that you could read a book written in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s and be reading a book that's accurately describing the world you're living in 2021.
Yeah. What's funny? I always think of Fahrenheit 451 kind of a piece with Ray Bradbury had a story called The Pedestrian, which you probably read. And he also has a book called The October Country, and that's really primo.
Yeah.
So basically in the Pedestrian, a guy goes for a stroll when strolling is illegal, because what's the point? What's the utility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, it's like I'm a reader, but most people never read a book again after they graduate high school and don't have to and aren't forced by the state, right? So a big idea in Fahrenheit 451 behind the censorship is bad thing is, why are you spending so much time reading the classics or listening to a record?
Yeah.
Right? How does that help the gross domestic product? Right? What's the utility of it? And you have these oddballs, these, like very much furtive, dangerous figures in Fahrenheit 451 who are like, no, it just pleases me. I just like celebrating beauty, sitting here in my tiny little room.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's pointless. It doesn't help the gross domestic product.
Yeah.
Right. That's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about Fahrenheit 451 too, and Ray Bradbury was always correcting people, I think, who misunderstood the point of the book. Like, the book is not about censorship.
Right.
His point of the book is not, oh, one day the government's going to censor all these great works of art and this great literature, and we won't have access to it. No, his point was that other forms of entertainment, like television, like stupid game shows and stupid reality shows and soap operas, and like all of that was going to take up so much of our time and our interest that people would willingly choose not to ever read again. And that was the tragedy, was that people had lost their appetite for great works of art and great literature. They were happier with fluff and emptiness and nonsense. And then that's what would lead then to this decision of the government, you know what, let's just get rid of this stuff. It's actually in our best interest now. We sort of discovered accidentally that, hey, it's actually better for us if people aren't aware of these kinds of things, who don't think critically, who don't aspire to greater things in their life than television. So let's just get rid of those things, right? It makes people a little bit easier to control and manipulate. But what starts it isn't the government deciding to take it away from you. What starts it is that people on their own decide that they just don't need that anymore. And they don't want that anymore. And then it's the government going after the fact, hey, yeah, we like that. Let's keep going that direction. And then let's make it official.
Yeah.
And I think in a way we're living in that world as well, right? Like people are much more interested in, binge watching, the Great Bake Off or something or whatever. I got to say, oh my gosh, listen, my mom pays way too much money for cable, right? I guess it's Dish or something like that.
Yeah.
A couple $100 a month, right? It's just insane to me how much he pays for this. And
wow.
And there is nothing on. And I don't mean just that
literally
nothing on. I mean the shows that she watches when I try to watch them with her. This is literally what the shows are about. So it'll be a show about like mountain men, or shows about this family that lives off the grid and they live off the land up on the mountain in the wilderness, and they have to hunt their own food and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's an interesting premise, sort of like one of them's about guys that are mining for gold in Alaska and things. Okay, it's interesting. But here's how these shows, every episode, dude, let me tell you, this is the formula. The entire plot of a single episode, it could basically be 3 minutes, like 3 minutes long, right? Hey, well, me and my brother, living up here in the wilderness, we heard a weird noise. So we walked up on the mountain and we saw this cave and we went in there, but there was really nothing in there. The end. Like that's the whole, but that's the whole episode. But it's the way you film that episode, right? So the first 10 minutes is the two guys walking in the woods, and then they hear a weird noise, and then cut to a commercial, and then come back and now recap the first 10 minutes. They were walking in the woods and blah, 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 and they were talking, and then they heard a weird noise. There's the reaction. Then they say, let's go up there and see what it is. Cut to a commercial. Come back from the commercial, recap the 10 minutes plus the let's go see what it is part. And now they're walking up to see what it is. And then they see a cave, cut to a commercial. Come back, recap everything again up to the point they see the cave. And then one of the guys says, let's go inside. I don't know. I'm kind of scared. Should we go inside? I think we should go inside. Cut to a commercial. Come back, recap the whole thing, have them standing in the front of the cave and go, let's go. Do you have a flashlight? Yeah, okay. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, the whole thing could just be like 3 minutes long, but you cut it into these pieces where you stretch it out, and you make me sit there for an hour to watch nothing. The other night, my mom was watching a show. It was a 2-hour episode of this, what is it, Oak Island?
Really?
Oh, which is a fascinating thing, right? Oh, there's this mysterious island with buried treasure, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's 2 hours long. And I told my mom up front, okay, I'm going to translate for you what a 2-hour episode of Oak Island Mystery, here's how it's going to work out. 45 minutes of not telling you anything, of teasing you of what they're going to find, and 15 minutes of them showing you what they didn't find.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what it was. I left about the first 30 minutes, but then I talked to her the next day and I said, so What did they discover? What secret did they uncover? What mysterious thing did they find by drilling in the hole there and doing the sonar and metal detecting and all that stuff? You know what they found? Nothing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for wasting 2 hours of your life on something that I could have just told you in about 3 minutes. And this is the world we live in, dude. There's whole networks, whole TV shows, whole production teams who have figured out how to dangle this carrot of a possibility in front of an audience for an hour or 2 hours and tell them nothing and then say, but tune in next week and we'll do the whole thing again. And they do. I can't put up with it, dude. It drives me insane.
You know, parents are kind of weird. I remember I was just at my parents' house and I'm sitting there and the phone rings and like 3 phones throughout the house ring at once. And my mother jumps up like a gunshot and goes to run to answer the phone, right?
Right.
And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, haven't I had my phone on silent since 2012?
Right. My phone doesn't ring. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny. It's like, you know, they're talking to me and like, oh, hang on, I got to answer the phone. It's actually kind of insulting because they're betting the person on the phone is more important than me, right?
Yeah, their own son.
Like,
yeah.
I'm like, you have voicemail. Can't you wait? Like, no, it might be important. I'm like, no, if it's important, that's what 911's for.
Right. Or that's why they could leave a message and call you back. No, you're right. See, my mom does the same thing. My mom complains every time I talk to her. This is her complaint. You know, we eat dinner with her almost every night. And she'll say,
wow.
She'll say, oh, the phone woke me up again this morning. Some idiot called me at 7 a.m. By the way, this happens every morning.
What?
Some idiot calls me 7 a.m. Who was it? Oh, it's that guy trying to sell me insurance, or it's that guy trying to get me to donate to the policeman's fund, or it's some sales call, right? And I'm like, Mom, unplug your phone. Before you go to bed at night, unplug your phone. And then when you wake up and you're ready to answer phone calls, plug your phone in as you're having your coffee in the morning or after you have your coffee in the morning. Oh, no, I can't do that. Why? Well, it might be something important. Mom, for the last 2 years, when the phone rings at 7 a.m. in the morning, has it ever been anything important? No. What has it been? One of those stupid sales calls. Exactly. Unplug your phone. She will not do it because
that's what 911's for.
Because maybe it will be important. And I said, Mom, if it's important, they'll call you back when your phone is plugged in. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's funny too. One thing that's funny about my parents is my dad's a real high functioning, great guy and, you know, has done all these interesting things, but he really likes TV and like he'll just turn it on and like watch weather or watch anything.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, and then my mother, she had this immunity where she never got TV. She just doesn't get it.
Oh, wow.
She just doesn't get it. And like, she likes to read and walk and play Scrabble. But, you know, my dad just goes to his TV at one end and like, she just kind of has to work around it. And my mother actually literally doesn't get it.
Yeah.
So she really likes it when I play Scrabble with her. That's her big thing. Or like go for a walk and look at birds or something. And also, I always remember like, I'd be like, why are these older people so interested in like the apocalypse and the world? And then if you spend an hour with them, now I know, right? They watch the news, right?
Right.
I'm like, why would you do that, right?
Yeah.
I remember a while ago, I saw my parents and they said, oh, so they asked me if I was upset about the results of the recent Canadian election. And I said, no, I'm not upset. And like, well, why not? And I'm like, because I choose not to be.
Right.
Right? No, I choose not to. I have other interests, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this whole thing about news, right? It's just a way of like making old people upset.
That's exactly what it is. Oh my gosh, when my mom says she watches the news, she doesn't mean she watches the news. She means she watches a network that's on 24 hours that has to invent something for you to be concerned about or outraged about, even if what they talk about for 3 hours is how they still don't know any information yet, but they'll get back to you as soon as they do. But in the meantime, to recap, here's what we don't know. And
You're right.
it's just, okay, here's another example. This whole thing about Alec Baldwin accidentally shooting somebody on a movie set, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it seems like the network news, or not what, cable news is determined to make this into some kind of a conspiracy or some kind of like episode of Columbo where, oh, Alec Baldwin really secretly wanted to murder these people, so he put real bullets in the gun, and when they said action, he just pretended and oh, look at me acting, and he got away with the perfect crime. No,
Yeah.
that's not how things work. The actor shows up, he memorized his lines, he puts on his silly costume, they hand him a prop gun, and they say action, and he acts out the scene, cut, it's over. He is not in charge of that gun or those bullets. Why are there live bullets on a movie set? If anybody is going to have their face on the news and have some big conspiracy, some big, story, it should be whoever it is was in charge of the prop guns on that movie set, because that person allowed real bullets on that set to be stuck into a gun that was going to be used in a movie. That's the story, not Alec Baldwin accidentally shooting somebody. But to make it as if it's a story, we were over there the night and flipping through channels and trying to find anything to watch. And of course, there's nothing to watch. And we flipped through a news story, and that was the story. Alec Baldwin, could he be tried for murder? And Mom's like, don't you want to see? I go, no, I really, really don't. They're trying so hard to make this into something that it's not. And it's really sad someone is dead, but let it go. Like, this is not a conspiracy. This is not some, this is not an episode of Columbo or something where, aha, we've caught a famous actor trying to get away with murder.
I think it sounds a little bit like an episode of Columbo, but I'm not sure I cared that much about that topic. But Norm Macdonald had a joke where he said when he was a kid, the news was half an hour, and then at the end, Walter Cronkite would say, "And that's it."
That's right.
Right.
And that's the news for today. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said, "Now it's 24 hours."
Right.
And he says, "It turns out when it was half an hour, that was about right."
Right.
That's all we needed. That's all we can handle. Right.
That's right.
And it's funny you said cable news, right? I've never had cable in my life. When I moved out of my parents' house, I'm like, why would I volunteer for an extra bill?
Right.
Right.
Especially, look, let me tell you, especially when there is so little to watch. I'm like,
literally,
if you're going to watch, I mean, I do pay a little extra for like Netflix because you know why? They have some great stuff on there. So that's why it's worth it to me. But if I was paying for Netflix and every time I went there was just absolutely nothing, why would I keep paying for it? I don't understand that.
Actually, I guess I've spent a lot of my life watching TV and movies, and then this thing happened like less than 10 years ago where I'd be watching a movie, and like there are some movies I can rewatch over and over again, like John Huston movies mainly or whatever. But I'd be watching a movie where I'm like, this should be up my alley. This is my thing, I thought. It's funny how as you age, you see your taste change over time, right?
Yeah.
And then so I'd be staring at the screen, and over here on the other side of the room, I'd see this window, and I'd see like this birch branch and this starling, right? And I'm like, I'd rather, if I was going to choose a square, I'd rather look at that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, wow, maybe I'm changing, right? And I really got into looking out the window, and then I got into bird watching and hiking, and I'd really recommend that,
Yeah.
And my dad asked me like, well, then where do you get your news from? And I'm like, and I said, I try not to. Like,
right.
I'm interested in right now in acquiring knowledge about pre-Raphaelite painters, like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and maybe next month I'll have some other curiosity, right?
Right.
But that's not my thing, news, right? And he's like, well, isn't it important to be a well-informed citizen, right? And I'm like, so I said to him, tell me how this knowledge benefits you, right? Okay, Alec Baldwin is a killer, right? Oh, okay, yeah. He's a serial killer. How does that knowledge benefit me today?
No,
Right?
it doesn't. And it's well, see, it's going back to what we were saying. It's how we got here in the first place. How Brave New
Yeah.
World, Fahrenheit 451 was showing us how if you can distract people enough with nonsense, that can be enough for them. And
Yeah. And it's funny. That's a question people never ask. It seems like we're like, I have a lot of like conspiracy theory friends, and I find them a lot more interesting than a lot of other people. Like, but sometimes it's like, I reach this point where I'm like, okay, let's say you convinced me,
yeah,
right?
what can you do
So
about it?
what?
Yeah,
Right? So what? Okay. I have no power here. There's nothing I can do about it.
right.
What do you want? Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's exactly right.
yes, once again, I think we solved all the world's problems in this episode.
Yes, we did.
But,
And once again,
yeah.
we tried to keep it under 2 hours and we kind of failed miserably, but that's okay.
Okay.
Well,
So basically, just to wrap up, so
Yes.
your top 10 list was Matrix, Times Code, and
Matrix,
say
Time
try
Crime.
Time Crime, sorry.
Yeah.
Blade Runner 2, Alien, Arrival, Under the Skin, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Her, Blade Runner, Children of Men.
Yep.
And we also recommend you have a double bill with Alien and Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava.
Yes.
And Time Code, double that up with Primer. And
Source code.
right?
Source code.
I'm sorry. I meant to say
Time Crimes
compare Time Crimes
with
with Primer. Also watch Source Code. Also watch District 9. Good movie.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that one, but that's another one where there was a short film. Neil Blomkamp, who made that movie, actually made a short film before that, which he did. I think he might have even used some of that footage or very similar footage in the actual movie District 9, where he's from South Africa, where he interviewed regular people in his town and asked them how they felt about the refugees that lived in the refugee camp. And then he got their reactions. And then, but he in the short film and in District 9, what he did was those are actual people reacting to how they feel about those refugees. But he changes the question to how do you feel about those aliens that are living over there? And it's the same answer. Like, and I love that. I love sort of that overlap of like the way we currently treat our own humans who live in this refugee camp. We would treat extraterrestrials the same way. We would be sick of them. They're taking our resources. We don't like them. We wish they go back to where they came from. All that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. And I love how he sort of juxtaposes those two things together. District 9 is actually a really great film. Also. And then you recommended Seconds.
Yeah. Those aliens in District 9 were actually pretty good.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah. They're kind of like, yeah. It's a good movie, actually. Yeah, I do like that movie a lot. That's one of those things too, where we could talk about this maybe in an upcoming episode too, where I think there's a lot of film directors who have like a first movie that's really awesome and then have never, ever been able to equal the brilliance of that first film. I can think of about 5 actors right now.
Yeah, it is sad, but certainly Neil Blomkamp's movies since then aren't that hot.
They're crap, yeah. Yeah,
it's crazy. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man.
Okay. Yeah. Also, I wasn't too happy with our horror episode.
Oh.
I don't. Just running through it like that. I thought we should have done like Halloween month for October.
Oh yeah.
Because you know how we had done like why is Christian art bad? Why is Christian art awesome back in the day?
Yes.
We should talk about why horror.
Okay.
Like how people like horror because it's a way to scratch the itch of grief and loss and the unknown in a safe room.
Yeah.
Why horror persists. That's actually an interesting question. And also in a future episode, we are going to talk about someone who's very important to me, Guy de Maupassant. The way you feel about Philip K. Dick, how you read him and go, wow, this is wild, this is blowing my mind, this is inspiring. That's me with Guy de Maupassant.
Okay.
So prepare by reading up on him, anything you can find.
Well, can you recommend
awesome.
at least one book people should start with?
Basically, he was more of a short story guy. So any short story you can find.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us, especially our greatest fan. Thanks for watching and listening.
Warren
And by the
Douglas
way,
Jennings in Illinois.
that's right. And by the way, if you do listen to our podcast and you enjoy our conversations, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, and especially if you could, if you see us posting a link to it on Twitter or Facebook, share it with your friends. Spread the word. We would really appreciate it. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next time. All right.